Okay. Hello again. It's lovely to welcome you all back for our final Teacher's Voice session this afternoon. I'd like to say hi to everyone in the theatre, but also our online audience and those of us that are joining from our satellite hubs at the University of Tasmania in Nipaluna, Hobart, and at Form in Boorloo, Perth. The Teacher's Voice sessions are such an important part of our program, and so thank you to all of our contributors today who've put forward to share their practice, and also to the education associations who've helped us assess the presentations and curate the program. It's been wonderful to work with you on this task. So the rules are that each presenter will have 20 minutes for their presentation. Unfortunately, we don't have capacity for questions this time, so I encourage you to seek out presenters at afternoon tea or the reflection sessions at the end of the day if you have questions. Our first speaker this afternoon is coming in from Tasmania. Sarah Brooke is presenting a paper on tographical inquiry as visual arts professional learning. Sarah is a PhD student and sessional lecturer in arts education with the University of Tasmania. Sarah is also a specialist visual arts teacher with extensive experience teaching across grades K to 12. Sarah's research is motivated by her own experience of visual arts education and her interest in meaning making and understanding and adopting visual arts practices and processes. She is particularly interested in how artography can help teachers develop their confidence and competence in visual arts education and create meaningful learning experiences for their students. Sarah is president of the Tasmanian Art Teachers Association and a practising artist who often explores and articulates complex concepts and understandings through her art practice. As I said, Sarah's joining us remotely today from the satellite event at the University of Tasmania in Nipaluna, Hobart. Sarah, thank you so much for being with us, and we look forward to your presentation. Thank you.
Hi, Georgia. Thanks so much. It's lovely to be able to connect in with everybody. And like we said, I'm down at our satellite event in Hobart, Tasmania. So it's really nice to be able to connect in with everybody. As I said, my presentation is about artography as visual arts professional learning for generalist primary teachers. And that's what my research is about as well. So I'm just going to share a little bit about working with the teachers that I worked with in our experiences and how we mapped that and the possibilities for what that could look like for future and other professional learning opportunities. So I'd like to begin by saying that Tasmanian art teachers, which includes myself, through our ongoing work in art education, acknowledge the original owners of the land upon which we learn, teach and create with our students. I live and work on Tomagina country in the northwest region of Tasmania, and pictured here on the screen are the petroglyphs from the Tiagara Walk at the Mersey Bluff, and that's really, really close to where I live, and these were carved into the dolomite by past Aboriginal people from this area. So this presentation examines and maps insights drawn from the shared experience of 4 teachers engaging in art making and storytelling in the visual arts. And it happened through autoethnographic and artographic inquiry. So this project asks researchers and participants to make meaning of their experiences of becoming pedagogical. And so becoming pedagogical is an idea that comes from the philosophy of Deleuze, and what it means in this instance is about the teacher's pedagogical identity and the artist's practice and identity. So it is where knowing is not fixed, it is contingent and contextually bendy. So becoming is a continuous process of transformation and change. So working with teachers on Tasmania's west coast, this research explores how generalist primary teachers perceive their own participation in visual arts making and responding experiences and the ways these implicate upon their sense of professional confidence and competence. So this presentation shares through visual renderings the core theoretical concepts that I uncovered in our generated data, as well as a painted quadriptych, which you can see on the screen now, which is a visual metaphor that maps our process. So the map shares our own experience of adopting our tography as visual arts professional learning, but it also offers openings for future professional learning processes. When I began my PhD, I was interested in exploring possibilities for professional learning for generalist primary teachers that encourage art making and story sharing to help enhance a sense of confidence and competence in their teaching of the visual arts. So artography was adopted, whereby the inquiry process of making, learning and knowing allowed for hands-on experiences of the visual arts. So artography is research that centres on living inquiry and reflective practice through examination of those in-between spaces of art making, researching and teaching, so the ART. Artographic research makes use of the identities, roles and understandings of the artist, the researcher and the teacher to reflect an approach to research that is dedicated to perceiving the world artistically and educationally. So that's the three generalist primary teacher co-participants and myself, worked with a shared understanding that the focus of our artographical inquiry was not the discovery of what already exists, but we were visually rendering our understanding of what it means to facilitate visual arts education while simultaneously exploring the impact and utility of engaging in artographical inquiry as professional learning on our own visual arts teacher pedagogies. So together we became collaborators. The borderlines between participant and researcher disappeared. In our becoming collaborative, as we were actively involved in artographic inquiry through the process of our visual arts making, we met for 1 hour a week for 10 weeks. So this was agreed upon together as a reasonable expectation for all of us. And that happened through conversation via email before we started to meet, and careful consideration of each collaborator's work schedules and responsibilities, and that was both personal and professional. So we each managed to make space to meet once a week for the duration of one Tasmanian school term, which was 10 weeks. We decided together that we would meet in the high school art room where I was currently working at the time. And this decision was made because of the wide range of art materials that were available for us to choose from when we were making our artworks, as well as the larger space that I had to spread out and make a mess in that particular room. And the other co-participants felt that their own classroom spaces, being generalist classroom spaces, would not allow for this to happen, nor did they have the resources or art materials that were available in my art room. So we all decided that was the best place to go. Our artographical inquiry saw us render and explore our own stories of visual arts education in the process of creative practice, which was our own visual art making. While engaged in our creative practice, we were sharing stories about our visual arts education experiences, both as teachers but also as learners. And we were unfolding connections and generative possibilities that exist between our stories. So these were surfaced and explored and unpacked through our art making processes as we explored various ways to make sense and meaning of our own becoming pedagogical in the visual arts. As we engaged in art-making practices as a way to explore and make meaning of our previous experiences of visual arts education, we were reflecting upon these in relation to the impact of this artographical inquiry experience on our own confidence and competence in visual arts teaching. So this reflective process offers data that acknowledges the importance of the interactive process of working in a collaborative space as a way to make meaning and to further develop knowledge of visual arts educational practice. To make meaning of the artographical inquiry data that we generated, so there are our artworks and there are a couple of examples of some of the beautiful artworks that were created by the participants on the slide that you can see now. I assembled all this data together in what was called data assemblages. So they were a coming together of our data, and their artworks with mine as well, and all our stories have been put together to create these assemblages. So it's to actively make links between the different parts of our data and our stories and establish relationships between them, or relations. These assemblages incorporate events that participants and I shared through stories of our past. They incorporate the tools that we explored and used to create our artworks, and also share some insights to an exhibition that we had as well of these artworks in our community. So the visual and textual metaphors interweave across the assemblages, and they build a bridge between our data and our meaning-making process. So here, just to break down a few things, there's some core theoretical concepts that come through when looking at all this and trying to piece it all together. So I've developed a figure here that I'm going to unpack in the next couple of slides, which shows these core theoretical concepts. And what this did was it helped me to see the interconnections or the touch points and spaces between us as we engaged in our artographical inquiry as professional learning process. So the concepts are, there's becoming, which is the branch, contiguity, which is the outline of the leaves, painting as research, which is the paint added to the leaves, and then metaphor, which is the gum nuts. So I'll explain each concept a little bit further. So becoming is the pencil line of the branch, and becoming was always present as we met, while we were getting to know one another, while we were sharing stories, working together, and then exhibiting the visual and textual renderings we made of our visual arts education experiences. So as co-participants, we were becoming collaborators in our lived inquiry process. We were becoming researchers, we were becoming teachers, becoming artists, becoming community. And I found myself constantly acknowledging how we were moving, so we were always in movement. And by using painting as research and employing metaphors, I was able to identify instances of becoming and reflect on their implications for our teaching practice through this artographical inquiry. Contiguity is the shapes, the pencil shapes forming leaves. So contiguity began to appear after we met and as we continued to be in contact with each other and work together. It is present throughout as we continue to work in nearness with each other. My use of contiguity as a methodological concept can be described as exploring concepts that touch each other, but those that are adjacent and connected. So when we worked together, we were moving adjacent to each other. We were keeping a proximity to each other and were connected. There was a coming together of our narratives and our art making, but we were not making these artworks together. It wasn't one whole piece of artwork. They were still individual pieces that were telling our own story. But we were making in relation, so in the same space, with each artwork sharing a personal voice, which throughout the process became blurred as similarities and differences arose between our experiences and our ideas. So the paint added to the leaves is painting as research. So painting as research happened while we were working in contiguity. I used the process of painting as research to help me consider and better understand what was happening between us while we were actually working. An integral part of my research process is painting. So creating artworks is a form of inquiry that can be described as a way of researching. So the world to unfold new understandings through the art making as research process. And with my painting as research process, I created visual renderings in paint, which helped me to unfold and find openings within our experiences and then within our generated data as a way to make sense of our experiences. And metaphor. So the gum nuts are metaphors. And metaphor is a tool often used by artists as a way to make sense of their world. And when reflecting upon all of our experiences and our generated data, elaborating through metaphor helps me to understand and be reflexive, as well as adding depth to my articulation of our data. So when the gum nut, the hard seed container of the eucalyptus tree, cracks open, it releases new life in the form of colourful seeds that burst out of their casings. And the visual metaphors through these assemblages are the bursting of colour that offer a new way of making meaning and understanding our data. Visual and textual metaphor and prose are deeply entrenched within this research project, and they emerge throughout in both written and visual forms. So they're the four core theoretical concepts, and they're interrelated like this painted eucalypt branch on the screen. So the concept of becoming, it holds the others together and is the constant movement forward in our process. It is always present and is given more attention throughout because of our constant movement forward in becoming. There are key points throughout where contiguity is more present, and there are particular points where we are working together, where our stories shared both through text and visually intertwine more than others. So again, painting as research is present in my adoption of the process of painting to record and make meaning of working with the co-participants. And metaphor surfaces in the returning and reflection upon the outcomes of my process of painting as research into metaphors that are both visual and textual in nature. So now that I've explained those concepts, I'll return to the painted quadriptych, which was shown earlier on in the presentation. And so this was generated through my process of painting as research while working with the participants. So I was painting this in the same space with the participants while we were working. And these paintings should be understood as a process of becoming. So where metaphor through paint is used to open up new ways of thinking, making meaning, and articulating our experience. And it has multi-layered meaning, but for this presentation, it becomes a map, which renders our professional learning process from those isolated, messy beginnings, and then it starts to sort of simmer and bubble together to the what next, or the offerings of what could come. To break them down just slightly, isolation is the first one. And so the first artwork, isolation, speaks to the four participants coming together. So we began as separate, isolated beings, and you can see here that we're each rendered as one of those little brush strokes or brush marks. And as we started to come together, more of our story and more of our experiences are more of the brushstrokes being added to that page, and you can start to see as the artwork goes along that they're becoming layered. So they're starting to blend together or become entangled. Muddling is the next one. And so it renders a metaphor for our process of becoming collaborative. It was our process of sharing stories, exploring art materials before and while to make connections and develop understandings of those art materials and of different materials, as well as ourselves and each other. So muddling was confusing. It was messy. We were trying to figure out who each other were, what we were doing, and how it was all going to come together. So it was a really collaborative meaning-making process for us, where our personal journeys of understanding of our own visual arts experiences and what this meant as they were becoming woven together with each other's stories. And it was the foundational meeting and mingling of those isolated separate beings and the beginning of those beings becoming entangled. And then there is simmering. So the simmering phase began to emerge throughout the second half of our tographical inquiry process and continued even after our weekly meetings had concluded. So we continued to connect and to meet and to explore after that had finished. So simmering for us is as things started to come together and make sense. As we started to connect with each other and make sense of our similarities and differences, we continued to get to know one another. We were finding our place. We knew the space. We were comfortable together in that space, and we were really getting into creating our artworks and what we wanted to share through those artworks. As we engaged in our own processes of art making as research, we had each chosen what art media we would use and what tools would best serve in exploring and expanding on those ideas. And the final piece was openings. And so that metaphorically renders the offering of knowledge, so the merging and blending of paint and simmering, becoming clearer, and it's rupturing the surface with new knowledge, offering possibilities for visual arts, professional learning and teaching through our contiguous process of becoming pedagogical. So it is the interwoven meaning made by us as co-collaborators in artographical inquiry as professional learning, and the what next, the questions and considerations for new lines of flight, and new meanings to be made and new possibilities. So returning to the painting as a whole, within this map, becoming is ever present in that movement and flow of painted marks becoming blended together to form more defined shapes and colours, rendering our process of becoming. As the paint marks form more defined shapes and colours, similar to bubbles rising to the surface, they are becoming contiguous beings, rendering us working in proximity to each other where our boundaries are blurred. And I would like to leave you with, leave this presentation with a woven reflection, which was created collaboratively after we finished our 10-week artographical inquiry process. So these are our reflections of working in artographical inquiry, and they are both in written form and then physically through the creation of this weaving. So each co-participant reflections, including my own, are in both a different colour and a different font. And through this presentation, I've shared with you the coming together of teachers in artographical inquiry as professional learning, offering possibilities for this professional learning process to be explored, adopted, and investigated further as a way to bring teachers together in becoming pedagogical. So on this slide, I know the comments are hard to read because I wanted to get both the physical and the textual images in there. So I'm just going to read you a couple of those comments. So participation in this process has put the visual arts back into the forefront of my mind and renewed my enthusiasm for finding ways to include it in the curriculum we offer children. Another one, there have been lots of things that we have shared in these sessions, and these have emerged in, through, and from our visual art making and responding experiences. Next, we have realised the need to provide more opportunities for the children to just experiment and to not always be so driven by the final product. We have found it beneficial to learn about and practice new and different techniques, which has given us inspiration for the children and refined our own skills. Next, having conversations with other teachers who enjoy the visual arts provides opportunities to share experiences and gives ideas for future learning opportunities. And the final one I have is, we have thoroughly enjoyed our time together and the opportunity to discuss our thoughts and experiences of teaching art while creating our own art. Okay, so thank you so much for listening to my presentation, and I hope it has offered some things to think about possibilities for artography as a way to think about visual arts professional learning for both generalist primary teachers, but also for specialist art teachers and even further beyond that. So again, thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for that wonderful presentation on that experience of such deep professional learning for generalist primary teachers, which is so important and I appreciate not always so available to everyone. So that was a really lovely presentation, and I will take away those states of muddling and simmering and openings, and I suspect we're all somewhere along that trajectory after these 3 days. Thank you. Our next presenter is Sally Leaney from New South Wales. Where are you, Sally? Oh, there you are. Sally's going to be presenting a case study on the artist Yuki Kahara. As a secondary visual arts teacher who has worked in a comprehensive boys' school in New South Wales for the last 16 years, as well as in her role as co-president of professional learning for the Visual Arts and Design Educators Association New South Wales, Vide, Sally has designed, implemented and shared extensive learning and teaching programs through statewide conferences, workshops, education resources and other platforms. With an expertise in applying educational philosophies and theoretical frameworks of the New South Wales visual arts syllabus to curriculum development, design and implementation, Sally has worked extensively to embed practices of critical reasoning to build student understanding of artwork meaning. Sally's research focuses on how teachers successfully use critical reasoning supported by explicit teaching practices, including direct instruction, collaborative response building and scaffolding, as well as real-world connections to support diverse, contemporary, challenging and relevant learning inquiries in art writing and art making. Sally, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Georgia. Firstly, I would like to take the opportunity to thank the committee and organisers and helpers of this conference. I definitely feel recharged, refreshed and repositioned, and the connections I've formed here have been deeply energising. So thank you so much. And Sarah's presentation was fantastic to listen to. I was thinking about my own students' art making practice and the words of the isolation through to the muddling and simmering and opening was just really quite relevant language for their bodies of work in Year 12. I loved that. And the woven form of the text was exceptional. I really love that too. But today I'll be talking about the art making practice of Japanese Samoan interdisciplinary artist Yuki Kahara. I'll be discussing my collaboration with the artist leading up to her keynote presentation at last year's Vide conference, and I'll also be talking about her practice as an exemplary case study for the secondary visual arts classroom. In the presentation, there are a couple of slides which have shortened URLs, and there's one QR code attached to an education resource at the end. So if you have your mobile phones available, you can use that. However, if you don't have your mobile, the content can be easily accessed via simple Google searches, and I'm happy to email anyone the education resource if you get in contact with me, and my email address will be on the last slide. So while I was somewhat familiar with Kahara's early photographic practice, I was especially drawn to her works in a 2022 issue of Art Asia Pacific magazine. The article introduced her stunning exhibition Paradise Camp, curated by Natalie King and shown at the 59th Venice Biennale in 2022. Kahara was the first Pacific artist to represent New Zealand in this space. Her body of work consists of beautifully saturated large-scale photographs and playful video works featuring a cast and crew of 100 people shot on location in Samoa. Wrapped around the gallery walls and floors is a monumental photographic depiction of an idyllic island paradise, a beach in Samoa devastated by storms a few years ago, as well as Kahara's VAR archive, a collection of personal research including rare books by 19th century explorers, colonial portraits and pamphlets. So you can see that in the bottom right there. The whole exhibition, Paradise Camp, is able to be explored virtually via the link on the slide, or just type into your browser Yuki Kahara Virtual Explore. And Paradise Camp, interestingly, is going to be shown in Samoa this year. So I'd love to try and get to that. Okay, so meeting and working with Yuki. I met Yuki Kahara online while she was at the Venice Biennale, and she generously accepted my offer to present at our 2023 Vide conference titled Off Grid. She informed me that Paradise Camp was going to be exhibited at the Powerhouse Museum in Sydney, which worked perfectly with the timing of our exhibition. What a treat. Prior to our conference, Kahara generously took me through the entire exhibition, providing extensive explanations of her material and conceptual practice. During our off-grid conference, attendees were invited to go off-grid, walking from our primary venue, which was at, UTS, to the Powerhouse where they could view Paradise Camp in situ, then listen to Kahara's keynote. Following the keynote, an interview-style format allowed our visual arts educator attendees to ask questions pertinent to their own classroom contexts. So why Yuki Kahara? As a contemporary Indigenous Pacifica artist, Kahara represents a distinct and unique perspective on complex issues to do with gender politics, environmental concerns, and colonial history. Kahara is a social and political commentator, activist and researcher who deals with issues in our own region in a unique, playful, and therefore highly contemporary way. Within my own context, I was aware of a gap in my teaching where the representation of Pacific Islander artist voice was not as strong as it could be. I was also curious about representation within other visual arts classrooms in New South Wales. It is also important to note that I've taught many Pacific Islander students over the years and want to ensure I have an extensive and ongoing understanding of how to teach ideas and issues relevant to these students and to know more about the culture that they belong to. Kahara belongs to the Samoan Fa'afafine community, and she seeks to empower this community in her representations. There are 4 culturally recognised genders in Samoa: Tane, which is a cisgender man, Fa'afine, cisgender woman, Fa'afafine, and Fa'atane. The word Fa'afafine consists of 2 compound words meaning fa, in the manner of, and Fa'afine, meaning woman. Therefore, Fa'afafine means in the manner of a woman and is used to describe those who are assigned male at birth who express their gender in a feminine way. Traditionally, Fa'afafine have very distinct roles in Samoa, acting as caregivers of young children and the elderly, and are known to be the first responders to natural disasters. However, whilst the Fa'afafine community have cultural recognition in Samoa, they are not legally recognised and are therefore absent from climate change statistics and disaster management planning. So despite, for example, the vital relief efforts provided by the Fa'afafine community, Fa'afafine have also been marginalised by inaccessible or unsafe facilities in emergency shelters. In response, Kahara's Paradise Camp addresses climate change from a Fa'afafine perspective by asserting the legitimacy of Indigenous culture and diverse gender identities. Kahara cleverly does this by representing the subjects of Gauguin's paintings, inserting Fa'afafine models into the scene as a way of critiquing and taking back the colonial gaze from an Indigenous perspective. Kahara first encountered the works of Gauguin when she held a solo exhibition at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York in 2008. Kahara noticed that Gauguin's subjects looked like members of the Samoan Fa'afafine community, placed within Samoan landscapes, despite Gauguin never having visited Samoa. In response, Kahara investigated archival records which revealed Gauguin used colonial photographs of Samoan people as a foundational reference for his major paintings of Tahiti and the Marquesas. Kahara states he'd probably collected them without any care for where they actually came from or who the people were in the photos, so long as they fit into his imagination of the primitive. In order to disrupt Gauguin's heteronormative westernised view of paradise, Kahara's 12 performative photographs employ an exaggerated camp aesthetic, using vibrant colour, beautiful costumes, and lush tropical landscapes to show paradise from a Fa'afafine perspective. This redirecting of Gauguin's paintings towards their original inspiration becomes a process of the artist and her community reclaiming the narrative. In Fono Fono o Le Nua Nua, Patches of the Rainbow, after Gauguin, Kahara repurposes and upcycles Gauguin's 1897 work, Where Do We Come From? What Are We? Where Are We Going? With members of the Alapata Fa'afafine Association dressed in rainbow-coloured costumes posing riverside in a photograph spanning over 3 metres. Whilst the colours may be seen as reference to the gay pride movement, in a Samoan context, the rainbow symbolises a portal into the spiritual world. As stated in Kahara's virtual website, the frieze represents a poetic, profound and resilient image, a community portrait which asserts new narratives. Kahara says, the idea of paradise that's fed to us is so heteronormative, I wanted to challenge that by deploying the camp aesthetic. For this, she draws on Susan Sontag, who defined camp as playful, exaggerated, and embodying the spirit of extravagance. She says, I upcycled Gauguin's works using Fa'afafine models to represent my own vision of paradise. One of Kahara's video works, titled First Impressions, Paul Gauguin, from 2018, is a 5-part episodic talk show series where moderator Anastasia Vancouver Stanley, aka Queen Hera, hilariously leads Fa'afafine panellists in candidly responding to a selection of Gauguin paintings, which the panellists had never seen before. Kahara's choice to introduce the paintings at the time of filming ensured an authentic and immediate response to the paintings. To watch the teaser, you can visit the link on the slide or just type the title into the work. It's well worth watching. Another fantastic part of Paradise Camp is Kahara's VAR archive, evidence of the artist's extensive research practice which informs her works and projects. Like the rest of Paradise Camp, VAR archive is fully accessible online and includes artefacts representing Samoan colonial occupation, climate change in Samoa, and Fa'afafine beauty pageants, of which Kahara has been a contestant and judge. The title VAR archive comes from Samoan writer Albert Wen, where VAR means the space between. This space is not empty space, but the space that holds things like objects, entities together. In this sense, VAR archive presents variation on familiar narratives, and new ways of looking at the world. This image shows a curriculum artefact from VAR archive, which I was able to discuss with Kahara during the conference interview. The document is the Samoan Ministry of Education's response to the Samoan Observers, a local newspaper, shocking reporting of the death of 20-year-old Janine Tuviaki in 2016, and includes a dedicated section on how to discuss Fa'afafine identity with students in a respectful way. And it's a curriculum document. I found that really interesting when I was at the exhibition. The education resource on Yuki Kahara was written by myself in collaboration with other Vide executives. The resource was produced by Vide members as part of the 2023 conference and will be made available to you during the duration of the conference using the QR code or shortcut featured on these slides. There's a paper copy there. You can also email me for a copy. The resource supports teachers and students to investigate relationships between the artist and the world through an investigation of her practice and her body of work. Within the education resource, extensive resource links, quotes, images of the artist's work, lists of key works and words and concepts, and questions for further research, including some linked to past HSC, New South Wales High School Certificate Examination questions, act as provocations for in-depth investigations and support students to challenge societal biases, including their own belief systems, from an informed perspective. It allows students to look at the local and broader global world in ways they may not have had access to previously. I know that my own students in my own classrooms can be quite confronted when I challenge them to interrogate historical narratives in critical ways, by considering the perspective of Indigenous artists who present alternative historical narratives. Miss, what do you mean by questioning history? History can't be questioned, and they soon find out that you can question historical narratives. By the end of these discussions, students move into a space where they not only understand that history is never linear or absolute, but they can also position themselves within and assess their own contribution to complex historical narratives. Students also gain an extensive understanding that contemporary artists know things, which result in an appreciation for what artists know and do. Applying some of the key words and concepts from the education resource to respond to questions 4 and 5 on the slide, we can say that, as a result of learning about Kahara's practice, students gain an understanding of how the artist collaborates with community members to expose and interrogate complex issues to do with climate, gender, and colonial representation by subverting Gauguin's Eurocentric representations, using performative photographic tableau to reclaim and return the gaze from a Pacifica perspective in an act of self-determinism and empowerment. I probably could have put a full stop in there somewhere, but this paragraph is evidence of how the meta-language and content from the education kit can be directly applied to producing a sophisticated response to provocation questions with students. The education resource also includes links to past high school certificates, senior visual arts questions. While the resource has been written for New South Wales visual arts teachers and students who are using that syllabus, it can easily be applied to other contexts because of the nature of the language and the ideas, etc. My final slide shows some of the feedback from the 2023 Vide conference, which indicated that the presentation by Kahara and the accompanying resource were very well received and valued, with teachers indicating that they would use the resource in their own classrooms, reinvigorating their senior case studies and applying content to learning and teaching opportunities in the subjects of visual arts and photographic and digital media. So I'd like to take this opportunity to say thank you for having me present today. I do have my contact details there, and I'd love you to be able to access the education kit. If you want to contact me to tell me how you went in the classroom with the teaching of this resource, I'd find that really interesting as well. We do produce a lot of documents and resources for Vide that we love to see people use and get something from. So thank you. Thanks, Georgia.
Thank you so much for that wonderful presentation, Sally, and that deep dive into Yuki Kahara's practice. Questioning historical narratives is such an important, skill or way of thinking to support our students to achieve, and it's really wonderful to see how you're supporting that to happen for your teachers and for your and for their students. It seems like an appropriate time to mention that the National Gallery will present an exhibition of Gauguin in June this year, so I hope that you get lots of use out of those resources, Sally. Our next presenter, Dr. Kathryn Hendy-Ekers, comes to us from Victoria, and Kathryn is presenting a case study, Contemporary Art on the Road program. Dr. Kathryn Hendy-Ekers is the Curriculum Manager for Visual Arts, Media and Design at the Victorian Curriculum and Assessment Authority. She is responsible for the visual arts and media curriculums from Foundation to Year 12. Kathryn has a Master of Education majoring in Visual Arts from the University of New South Wales and a PhD from Charles Sturt University. She is an experienced educator with teaching experience in primary and secondary schools in Victoria, interstate and in Southeast Asia. She has an interest in the relationships between curriculum and the arts industry through teaching and learning in art galleries and museums and the role of artists working in schools. Her research for her PhD investigated how teachers and museum educators enact curriculum in contemporary art museums. Kathryn lectures in visual arts education at the Australian Catholic University. Kathryn, welcome to the stage. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Georgia. What a great introduction. I always get a bit mind blown when those go through, but I like the speaker before, I'd really like to acknowledge the work that has gone into this conference, and particularly, as Georgia said, my passion is the connection between art museums and art galleries and teachers and classrooms and students. So I will touch on a bit more of that in my presentation. Okay, so firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that I work and live on, the traditional owners of the Wurundjeri country of the Kulin Nations, and also the Ngunnawal and Ngunnawal people who we're presenting from today, and acknowledge the elders both past, present and emerging. So what I'm actually going to go through today is just a rough overview of showcasing what we do in terms of our curriculum. And probably I know over the 3 days I've been speaking to a lot of teachers and museum educators and different people from galleries and museums over the last 3 days. And just probably I would like to shed a bit of light on how we work some of your ideas into curriculum and maybe dispel some of the myths behind curriculum and how we develop things, and we hope that you embed them into your classroom practice. So with that, I'm also going to talk about, in Victoria, particularly how we have embedded learning in art museums and learning with contemporary art throughout the curriculum, right from foundation right through to Year 12, and talk about a program called Contemporary Art on the Road, which is a bit of an exemplar of those teaching practices and the connections between curriculum. Okay, so just to go through, we have two what we call senior secondary VCE visual arts courses. One is art making and exhibiting, and the other one is art creative practice. So they get reviewed every 5 years, and it's just not me who sits there and develops the curriculum. I work with a review panel. So as Georgia explained, I was a teacher for about 20 years before moving into this role and teaching in university. So when I develop curriculum, I work, and probably some of you may have been involved in a similar process in your jurisdiction, where I work with a group of teachers and university tertiary academics across all sectors, so a government, Catholic and independent, to develop the course over a period of 12 months before we start an initial year of implementation. So these two courses were reviewed in the middle of COVID, so in 2020 and 21, and then the courses were first taught in last year in 2023. So traditionally, these two courses, one was VCE Art, was much more academic. The numbers were dropping, and the other one, Studio Arts, as it was called, was very much a secondary sort of VCE course. So we needed to raise the academic integrity of both, well, particularly Studio Arts. So we rebadged the whole lot, and we looked at the relationship, particularly to the Australian and Victorian curriculum, and that idea of making and responding. And as we've heard all through the last couple of days, the importance of engagement with students, with artists, and having that moment when they get into a gallery and they experience an artwork for the first time, and that direct engagement and hearing those stories is really, really important. So that has been embedded right through our curriculums. And also, as you'll see, and I think Robin Carmody spoke earlier today about the work she had done with visual arts with the Australian curriculum. So you can see this art making and exhibiting study has two components. It has making artworks. So you can see on the screen there, that's the integral part of this course, and you can see the key concepts around the outside. So it's art forms, techniques, processes, materials, aesthetic qualities, art elements and art principles, visual language, ideas and meaning, influences and inspiration. So they're the key concepts of the curriculum. Down the right-hand side of the screen there, they're the key command terms that we use with teachers so that when they're unpacking those concepts, how they look at each of those concepts and how they develop their units of work. Okay, the other component of this course, which is very, very unique, we have a structure called exhibition, design, curation and conservation. And in the VCE course, that goes right through the 2 years of the course. So the students actually look at design of exhibitions in this particular course, they look at curation and they look at conservation. So with the exhibition design, if you have a close look at some of our courses, the students, the schools are told that the students need to, in Year 12, visit 2 exhibitions in the year of their study and also in Year 11. So it really does mandate that students and schools do have to take their students to a gallery. Now, that I know for a lot of regional schools, and I'll talk about the program, Contemporary Art on the Road program in a moment, does present some difficulties, and it particularly during COVID was also presenting. So we often say that students can look at an online or a virtual exhibition as part of their study. So it's very, very important. They're looking at the different characteristics of exhibitions in different spaces. And we believe by doing that, it really gets the students involved and engaged with artworks. So I know we've had a lot of conversations over the last couple of days about teaching art theory and art history, and we found that this is a way of really engaging students, that experience, and working with a museum educator who has often a slightly different approach to a teacher is really, really valuable. The other thing, specifically the way that artworks are curated and exhibitions are curated in different spaces, so they can look at commercial spaces, large public galleries like this, artist-run spaces. They can look at outdoor exhibitions, artworks in public spaces, how they've been curated. And then we have conservation as well. So there is a component where the students actually look at how works are conserved. Previously, these sort of pillars were already in the studio arts course, but they were very much rote learnt. So we decided that to reframe things and really get students involved was really important. And this study also reflects into the way they make artworks. So you can see there, that's a bit of the structure of the course. So you've got the three: exhibition, design, curation and conservation. And then we're looking at museums, galleries, other exhibition spaces and site-specific spaces. And we provide a rough sort of a definition of what those spaces are for teachers. And again, you can see down the middle the key terms that we use. The other course is Art Creative Practice. And it has a very strong, as you can see on the screen, a process, a structure. We find that teachers find that really useful to structure their courses and their assessments. So we've looked at other syllabuses across the country and internationally, and we came up with this model that we call Creative Practice. So it's got 4 components that the students actually investigate. So we have research and exploration, experimentation and development, refinement and resolution, and reflection and evaluation. So in both courses, this sort of structure is really coming through. We give the teachers and the students some key questions and frameworks that they can use when they're developing their courses. So we also have what we call interpretive lenses. So if you're in New South Wales, you might know the word frames. Very, very similar. So we have those approaches. So we have the structural, personal and cultural frameworks that the students, when they're making artworks and responding to using the art creative practice. So just a bit of an overview to what we actually do. And that there again, that is reflected down into year or foundation right through to year 10, particularly you'll see in the new Australian curriculum, that component of present and responding to art is very much leading up to these courses. So students do go to artworks and they look at them. So they're looking in gallery spaces of how artists apply materials, techniques and processes, how they express ideas and meaning, cultural, historical and social concepts, and how artworks are displayed. So how that artwork is interpreted in the space or the exhibition it's displayed in. So often too, it's really useful for schools and teachers to look at a travelling show. So for example, the Archibald presentation has gone from the Art Gallery of New South Wales. It tours regionally, and it's really interesting to see how the artworks are presented in different spaces. And also they look at all the what I call the collateral around an exhibition. So all the public programs, the exhibition brochures, promotions, and really interpret that. So it gives the students a bit of an insight into the art industry. With exhibition information. So this presentation has a whole lot of links in it that goes to various websites. So a lot of the galleries that we work with in Victoria, so we have for our VCE, we have what we call an exhibition list that we publish each year, which I put out to every public gallery and art space in Victoria through the Public Galleries Association, invite them to put in some information about exhibitions they've got coming up and any sort of resources or links they might have for schools. So that's often very invaluable because, as we know, more and more galleries are putting material online for you to use. I know from working with teachers and schools and a lot of galleries, there's some great information out there. So they look at, and a lot of the galleries are now producing information specifically for our Victorian courses. So we're looking about how artworks are displayed, themes of exhibitions, the relationships between artworks, and how various artworks have been presented in exhibition spaces. So they research exhibitions, so that's just some of the things they do. They look at, they have to look at an exhibition in Year 12, look at how those artworks are displayed, the relationships between them, the context of where the artwork was made and how it's the differences of it being on display, and what the intentions of the artists are in respect to the work being exhibited. So I think I remember, I can't remember if it was yesterday, I remember somebody talking about the artist working with the gallery when the work was presented in a different location, and what were, I think it was the Wolfson work you were talking about yesterday afternoon. So importantly, it is looking at the different characteristics of exhibition, what we call exhibition spaces. So if they're solo shows, thematic shows, a survey, a retrospective, and what sort of environment the artworks are displayed in. So that, again, just the different types. And then we look at the curation, so the roles and responsibilities for curators and how they work with it. So a lot of our students will go to a gallery and hear a curatorial talk and work with the gallery in a lot of schools. The Museum of Australian Photography, which was formerly the Monash Gallery of Art, has specific programs, and one of the organisations I'll show in a moment does as well. So they present it. So they present as an annotated exhibition document, so a proposal that the students are assessed on. And then, for example, that's just one of the outcomes from the curriculum. So we give teachers in support material a bit of some structures, some questions they could use when they're developing their research. So I'm more than happy, these are all available on our website, the Victorian Curriculum Assessment Authority website, as examples that you may want to look at with your students. Then they look at conservation, so for part of the Year 12 course, so they look at how exhibition furniture and transport of artworks, condition reports, material stability, lighting levels, temperature and humidity for specific artworks. And also it links to the students' art making. So the students need to look at the different forms of conservation and then consider their own artwork and how that would be conserved and presented. So there is a very strong link between the way, what the students are doing in their own practice and the exhibition of works on display and how they're conserved. So they're presented as a case study. So it's fairly open-ended because we work with a curriculum in Victoria where there is a lot of school-based assessment. It provides schools with flexibility. So that's just the outcome there with some of the questions that we leave. So we have a very strong inquiry-based curriculum, so a lot of questioning, as I think Sarah was talking before. So on to a particular program. So Contemporary Art on the Road is a program I work on with Monash University Museum of Art and Gertrude Contemporary. So it's a government-funded program through the Department of Education in Victoria, and it runs for 3 years. So the gallery gets, both these galleries get this funding. What the program is, they use, Gertrude Contemporary is a contemporary space in Preston in Melbourne, and it has a studio of about 30 artists that work throughout the year. They select one of their artists to work on the program, and that artist tours with us into regional galleries across Victoria for about 10 days. So they go to, we usually go to Horsham, Castlemaine, Shepparton, so a regional gallery, and they actually work with teachers in the gallery space. So the artist works with myself and the gallery educator very closely to develop a program where they talk about their practice, and we also work with the local, the regional gallery, and the educator from the regional gallery takes the teachers through that gallery. So whereas the first presenter was talking about, it's very much a collaborative project where the teachers do consider what the artist is doing, and it has been very valuable for the artists themselves, particularly to enable the artists to understand how the curriculum works and how teachers approach the curriculum. So it is very much a collaborative and a growth program for all of us. So, for example, last year, Lisa Warrup was one of the artists who is located at Gertrude Contemporary at the moment. Lisa is a local artist from Melbourne who is of Kulin Nation Wurundjeri descent. So she has been working at Gertrude Contemporary. She also is involved with the Victorian College of the Arts in their visual arts programs. So Lisa developed a weaving program that she took out and talked about her practice to the teachers in the program out at regional galleries. They made a work in response to Lisa's processes, and they also walked through the gallery space with Lisa and the educator from the particular gallery and talked about the works. So that's just a link to the website. So you will see that from each visit there is a resource produced. So Sharon Flynn, who is the educator at Gertrude Contemporary, if you get in touch with me, she is going to send out one of her resources. So you can actually have a look at the resource, has links to the Victorian curriculum and also the VCE studies. So a teacher can take away that resource after doing the workshop and consider how they can use it in their classroom. The other part of the program was Monash University Museum of Art Education. They come out, they talk about their programs and their teachers, two teachers. So both organisations do run a professional learning day for teachers in their spaces in metropolitan Melbourne. But I just thought I'd showcase this to you. This is an example of an exhibition that came from the Biennale of Sydney that was at Mama, we call it, last year in April. So it was a selection of artists from the Sydney Biennale, and of course it was based on water. And one of those artists was Jessie French, who works developing, and you may have seen the work when it was in Sydney, works developing algae-based artworks from recycled natural products. So she came out, spoke to the students, spoke about her work in the space, and naturally the students produced an artwork from that. So I'm just going to flip through quickly because I've got just running out of time, but you can see some examples. That's the work in the exhibition. They have a lovely exhibition space that's brand new out there. And then Jessie, here she is working, boiling up seaweed with the students. And then they made these amazing little containers made from recycled the seaweed. So these containers will break down and can be reformed into new artworks. Okay, so I hope that's just given you a bit of an insight to the way we work in Victoria. There are my details on the screen, so I'd be more than happy if you have any queries to answer. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Kathy. It was a wonderful case study and always so exciting to see new opportunities for collaborations between museums and schools and teachers. So thank you so much. Sorry. Our final paper today is presented by Vide Freiberg, who's presenting a paper on cultural sensitivity in art teaching, honouring Indigenous narratives. Vide is an art teacher and member of the Western Cape College community in Weipa, Cape York. Vide has over 15 years of teaching experience, merging a passion for art with a commitment to cultural inclusivity. Vide's upbringing in a First Nations community has instilled in her a deep respect for culture and social justice. Her career trajectory, spanning galleries, TAFE, an independent First Nations school, the youth justice system, and a 5-year tenure in Cape York, reflects a diverse and dedicated approach to education. Vide, thanks so much for being with us today and sharing your presentation. Thank you.
All right, so I too would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of this country. I also want to extend my acknowledgement to the Alnith and Thanakwith people and all other traditional owners from the Western Cape and the Torres Strait who entrust me with the privilege of working with their kids every day. From this I get great experiences and learning, and I'm able to share that with others. Before I start, I just want to share this photo that I took on Monday. So I've never been to Canberra before, I'd never been to the National Gallery, and as I entered the lawn out the front, this is the first thing I saw. For those who don't know, this is a Thankupi piece. I grew up in Cape York and I had the great privilege of knowing Thankupi from a very young age and learnt from her until a week before she passed. I watched her, spent many precious hours of my life as a child watching her, learning from her, listening to her. So when I came up here on Monday and saw this, I felt like life had come full circle, and I feel like I'm being cheered on from the front lawn there. So just thought I'd share that with you. So like most teachers in Australia, I don't identify as Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander. However, like all art teachers in Australia, I am accountable for providing all my students with an authentic art education. So today I'm simply going to share my story about trying to honour Indigenous narratives, granting myself permission to express that I don't know everything, I never will. I'm honest and proud to say that I'm constantly questioning my intentions, decisions, cultural efficacy, and any bias that I may hold. It's an ongoing journey, and I feel professionally and personally obligated to navigate it. So this is a little, being creative soul, I often come up with little things for myself. So this is a little revelation that I articulated a few years ago. It's a rather obvious statement, but when pondered in depth, I feel like it rings true in all situations and is instinctively a human behaviour common to all. So I encourage you just to contemplate this for a moment and place yourself within this theory. So consider workplaces, friendships, relationships, family, past, present. I feel like it's pretty safe to say that we've all, we need that sense of belonging and value to succeed. So I'm now 44 years old. And as mentioned, I did grow up in Napranum in Cape York. And then for high school, I was sent to an all-girls boarding school in Brisbane. It's quite a change. And this is what the art curriculum looked like for me back then. It was pretty colonised. That was at my textbook up the top there. And I do recall there was one page on Australian Aboriginal art, and it had an image just like what you can see in the corner here, some stenciled cave paintings, a few dot images and some X-ray images. And that's what I was taught at school. And then I think of the saying, we teach what and how we have been taught. And that freaks me out. So as part of my story today, I just want to give you a little bit of a snapshot first of my diverse context. So there it is. I am one of 4 visual arts teachers up at Western Cape College in Weipa, and I teach in the secondary sector with about 500 students. Weipa is a mining town which was established in 1967 following the discovery of bauxite. Population is about 3,000 people in town, and the livelihood is very much associated with the mine. So this is Tom, and Tom is one of 72% of my students at school who identifies as Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander. Tom hails from Arakoon, which is situated about 300 kilometres south of Weipa, along a dirt road, and you can see up there on the map, Arakoon's just below Weipa. It was one of 3 missions that was set up in Cape York to protect the people from pastoral exploration and marine industries in the Torres Strait. The other one was Marpoon. And just outside Weipa, it's not on this map, but they're about 15 minutes outside Weipa is a community called Napranum. And we have students from all those communities, but the Napranum kids come in to us by bus every day. So Tom is one of 65 students from around Cape and Torres Strait living at the residential campus, away from home and family to attend his secondary education. Before attending Res Campus, Tom lived in Arakoon his whole life. At school, all of Tom's classes are taught in English. This is Tom's third language. Being the eldest sibling in his family holds great importance for him, and his lineage goes back thousands of years, adding depth and richness to his identity. So now that you've met Tom, I'm going to pose a few questions for you to think about. I want you to consider where in art classes 30 years ago would Tom have felt valued? Could he have been pigeonholed by this curriculum? Maybe it was his parents pigeonholed by the curriculum. What if this was still taught today? Would Tom feel valued? And looking at these images from the curriculum 30 years ago, how far have we come? I, like many of you, are connected through social media and to an array of art teacher forums. And at a glimpse, for many art teachers, this is what was evident. Some teachers are still teaching what they were taught 30 years ago, and you can still buy resources which support this. I can still see a link between what was taught 30 years ago and some of our NAIDOC banners, school murals, and school polo shirts. It is evident that some teachers are unsure how to use or access Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander resources in their classroom, but they're constantly reaching out to clarify, which is great. And finally, I can also find evidence that unfortunately, due to the fear of not being respectful, some teachers aren't attempting culturally inclusive practices, either appropriate to their context or at all. So these are some examples of the concerning resources and conversations that are being shared amongst our educators, art educators. And as I said at the beginning, this is a journey for everyone. My journey is especially motivated by the inherent belief that Tom, like all my students, brings so much to be valued in my art classroom. Tom's culture and success should not be stifled by my knowledge and my experience. And I believe we need to work harder to ensure that everyone in our industry values diversity, the sophistication, richness of Australia's First Nation cultures. So where do we start? So this conference is about reimagining best practice, not teaching what we've been taught. For me, the first step towards seeking authentic art education that First Nations students feel valued within was when I repositioned myself. So the process of repositioning unpacked my Eurocentric privilege within an education system to recognise the strengths and amazing knowledge that my First Nations students bring with them to school. By repositioning, I am also motivated to provide opportunity for non-Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders to recognise it too. By repositioning myself, I can recognise the challenges that students like Tom face while often navigating to find a sense of belonging or value in a system that wasn't originally designed for them. And by repositioning myself, I work harder, I dig deeper, and I'm willing to accept that sometimes I'm going to get it wrong, but it's worth prevailing. So for those of you also interested, I have written an article about my own repositioning, and I'm willing to share that. I just feel that sometimes it's easier to understand your own journey through someone else's experiences. So reach out at the end if you want me to email a copy of that to you. So this is the process I use to initially audit my First Nations resources to ensure they are free from non-Indigenous perceptions, including my own. I need to guard against misrepresentation and misuse. I analyse the resources against two main elements. So I've got knowledge tradition at the top, and then I've got authorship. So when assessing the knowledge tradition of a resource, I'm considering the associated protocols and the depth of comprehension to avoid promoting Aboriginalism. And when I'm looking at authorship, when I scrutinise authorship of a resource, I need to ensure it excludes dominant discourses and avoids othering frameworks. So with the knowledge tradition, visual arts is recognised as a knowledge tradition, as is language, dance, etc. And we know First Nations art boasts a legacy spanning over 65,000 years, marked by cultural diversity in style, execution, use and intent. However, when I do an online search for Australian Indigenous art, it yields cliches like dots, concentric circles, handprints and animal symbols. As evidenced previously, I know the intricate knowledge embedded in First Nations work is still being reduced to simplistic representations propagated in our classrooms and promoted to students. I cannot disregard the depth of knowledge embedded in artworks. This equates to seeking guidance or consent to ensure protocols according to customary laws are being respected, and I cannot disregard the diversity of knowledge that is evident. Or I will fuel debate by Western audiences about authenticity based on the adherence to traditional stereotypical images and symbols. So First Nation artworks and artists are still being assimilated by Western audiences, but as Tony said this morning, there is a shift, which is great. As Richard Bell insinuates, by not gaining an understanding of knowledge, tradition behind a particular resource, we unwittingly freeze First Nations people's knowledge, First Nations people knowledge and art in a static moment of time, and that is what is termed Aboriginalism, and it is detrimental to all. Authorship is about ensuring that the artist is the authority on the knowledge presented. I want to focus on examining the artist's intent behind the work. When examining my chosen resource, I want to be aware of romantic discourses to ensure the knowledge about the resource is not mediated or represented by non-Indigenous informants. I also need to be aware of othering. When researching the resource for myself and or presenting it to my class, without a repositioned awareness, othering is very probable and promotes bias. I must search for direct quotes, interviews, artist statements, and contact the artist directly if possible. And Kelly Cole also mentioned on Monday, looking at First Nations curators and what they've got to say about a work. They come from a different perspective. So this is the work I've been using. So Neither Pride Nor Courage by Vernon R. Key. This has been a central focus in my Year 8 unit for about 5 years before I conducted my own little audit. In Year 8, visual arts is mandatory. It's a 9-week module, and I have the kids for about 2 blocks a week. Throughout the year, I have every single Year 8 student completing the unit, and this unit has proven to engage students that are otherwise disengaged in most of their schooling or aspects of their schooling. It has, at my school, become a little bit of a rite of passage. Kids have seen cousins, brothers, sisters, siblings, have had success in it before. They've seen it displayed. And so they know it's coming up in Year 8 and they look forward to it, hence the longevity of the delivery of this unit. So in this series, you see family lineage used to disrupt prevailing discourses associated with Australian history. Vernon R. Key redraws anthropological representations of his great-grandfather, and then he adds the drawing of his son to the end. The core focus when I use this work in my unit is to explore representation, portrayal and identity. My objective in the unit has always been to guide students through a journey of visual and contextual inquiry, empowering them to unravel the profound knowledge I believed was embedded in the work. They will apply new insights, which is their knowing, to their self-perceptions, their being, and utilise their newfound awareness of power to create self-portraits representing how they relate to their worlds, which is their doing. So here I go. In reference to my first point of inquiry, the knowledge tradition, which is concerned with protocols and Aboriginalism, I found this quote directly from the artist, which I believe encapsulates these exact challenges. So this is Vernon Arkey, I've had to barrage audiences into accepting that I'm Aboriginal in terms of what I make. People expect Aboriginal art to be benign and decorative. My work is Aboriginal art. It describes the life and history of Aboriginal people in this country. It describes the life of Aboriginal people in contemporary and modern times. We are not Stone Age people. The first thing my students understand is that art encompasses knowledge passed down through generations. It evolves over time, continuously interpreted in the present, and is bound to evolve in the future. As I introduce the work, the definition of First Nations art has just been opened right up for them straight away. When I consider authorship, as mentioned before, I aim to address any inconsistencies in the interpretation that impacts the authenticity of the resource's knowledge. It is here I will admit that before conducting this audit and delving deeper for the artist's voice, I incorrectly mediated this work for many years to the detriment of many students. Titled Neither Pride Nor Courage, I had assumed that the work invited viewers to empathise with the sitter. Through my lens, the sitter represented a member of one of the longest surviving cultures, a person who should be portrayed with pride and courage. I saw strength, but strength through a lens of empathy, a result of arrogance. As a result, my students were led to empathise with Arkey's great-grandfather and therefore recognise the power they have today to represent or portray themselves. Following the audit, with a focus on authorship, I was able to ascertain the authentic knowledge embedded in this work. I received knowledge presented directly by the creator, and this time not mediated or represented by non-Indigenous informants with a Eurocentric lens like my own. I reviewed interviews, I read artist statements, and I even asked direct questions through a Q&A to find out the following. So what I found out was Arkey presents the artwork not about history, but about his own life and culture, about kinship, connection, and resilience. He does not want his subjects to be portrayed as victims of the past, in need of empathy, but instead recognised for the enduring qualities of persistence, strength, and determination through a lens of intelligence and sophistication. It turns out the title Neither Pride or Courage serves a deliberate challenge to conventional expectations. So as a result, this simple audit structure raised important questions about how I was using the resource. My initial interpretation inadvertently highlighted the subjects as victims, contradicting Arkey's knowledge and perspective. With my ill-informed interpretation, students were previously led to empathise with Arkey's great-grandfather to understand the freedom and power that they have to represent or portray themselves positively. However, following the audit, I now provide my students with a representation that more correctly aligns with the artist's intent. They analyse the visual conventions and connect with the work, focusing on assets and capabilities. They then apply this strengths-orientated approach to leverage qualities connected to their own identity and sense of selves. So this is a little showcase of the work over the years. You can see the success of Indigenous and non-Indigenous students. The identity statements range from places of belonging, kinship connections. So you'll see some last names. I'll just play through.
I am a leader.
Oh, yep. You'll see some last names mentioned there. Some of them go into their roles and responsibilities that they may have. And qualities that they think define them, positive qualities that they think define them. The sophistication ranges in their stories, but they are their stories and they own them, and that's what's important to them. It's also been really successful with differentiation. So this student here is profoundly deaf. In the next lot here, this child severe autism and is non-verbal, so that was his interpretation. So yeah, overall it's been a pretty successful unit, and we also dabbled in a bit of technology there with QR codes and some animation. So to conclude today with a little snapshot of this is a little snapshot of the major works you will find in Western Cape College's art curriculum alongside local art and knowledge. Every resource that we use has been scrutinised by our teachers using that shared process. If we can't ensure an artist's voice or knowledge is authentically communicated through the work, we don't use the resource. I want to now just revisit some of those questions from the beginning of the presentation. So is it now more likely that Tom feels valued within the curriculum? Is it now more likely that Tom will be successful in the curriculum? And is it less likely now that Tom could feel pigeonholed by or stereotyped by this curriculum? And just to conclude, as I mentioned before, this has been a small chapter in my journey that has and always will have bumps in the road, so I'm not ashamed of the bumps. Just thought I'd throw a little bit of a Cape York reference in there to four-wheel driving. These bumps inspire me, and I just keep upgrading my tyres and increasing my tread. That's an analogy for long life learning, people, all right? So I really hope you found this presentation useful, and if you feel that there's anything from my story that can benefit your journey, please reach out. I'd be happy to hear from you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vide, for your passionate words and call to action, and for sharing those beautiful works with us. I think your paper raises the most important issue for all of us to take forward, and we hope that this conference helps with that. And Vide, what a fabulous way to finish the presented papers. So thank you so much. I'll now just provide a little bit of instruction about what's happening next. So we're heading to an afternoon tea break. I hope those of you who are on site will stay with us for afternoon tea and participate in a little bit of reflection before you head off and back to your homes across the country. If you're joining us online, there's a break now. Anyone who would like to experience the Lindy Lee talk, either on site here in the theatre, it will begin at 3:00 Canberra time. If you're online, you can navigate it to that session via your agenda and look for the Lindy Lee session. I've just got a few little bit of information to share. We've added links to all of the National Gallery programs and resources, and if you've downloaded the conference app for on-site attendees or online attendees, you can find information in the resource list in the platform, and the keynote sessions will be added there in the coming days. Also, for online delegates, we'll be in touch after the conference if you're seeking accreditation to get your NESA numbers so we can follow up the accreditation process. If you have any questions about accreditation or anything else, jump onto the digital help desk, or also come down to our in-person help desk in Gandal Hall. We'll be there till the end of the day. So we might see you back in the theatre at 3, and hopefully we'll see you for reflections at the end. Thank you again to all of our presenters. It's been a wonderful session, and I feel really privileged to have been part of it. Thank you.